have been having trouble with my asparagus plants this year, and I'm not really surprised, but I want to do what I can to fix it. Let me show you what's happening. Last year, I renovated this area of the garden. Now, before I put in these Vigo garden beds, which I love. It has nothing to do with the metal garden beds, the problem that I'm having. They worked out beautifully. They did exactly what I wanted them to do. This bed used to look like this. It had cinder blocks as the base layer, and then the top layer was these retaining wall bricks just to cover up the holes in the cinder blocks. But I live at the Jersey Shore, and it's very dry and very hot, and happens to be native habitat for black widow spiders. So if you saw any of my videos from last fall regarding the fact that my friend, who is a pest control expert, and I found a good 10 black widows within a 5-foot space of this type of retaining wall, I knew that it was time to change that area and reduce the amount of habitat that they love. Black widows really like hot, dark, undisturbed areas, and that's what was happening over there in my asparagus bed. Now, there were a few things planted in that bed in addition to the asparagus. I had a pineapple sage plant, which should be hardy to zone 7, and it was in a very warm microclimate right up against the south wall of the house, but it was not happy. After a couple of years, it did not come back. I did replace it with another one, and that one died after a year, so I kind of gave up on the pineapple sage plant. And then I had a lot of oregano over there, and a few other things that came and went, but the asparagus were doing amazing, and they were all crowded into a very small area. So when I decided to replace those bricks and renovate that bed, I said I'm going to spread out the asparagus so I get a better harvest, and they have more elbow room to spread their roots. So I did. I dug all of it up, and there were like 17 plants within an 8-foot space. That makes no sense for asparagus, and it really needed to be done. And they were robust root systems, huge. Every plant was like at least 16 inches across when it came to the root system, sometimes more. They were the roots themselves were thicker than an asparagus stalk would be. So they were really, really happy there, even though they were crowded. But I knew I wanted to spread them out, and I did. And this is what has happened so far this year. They're not happy. Garbagey is the technical term. They're being attacked by pests, which I'm not really surprised about, because these pests have been kind of attacking the asparagus for a couple of years now. By midsummer, this becomes a hunting ground for wasps because there are little larvae that crawl all over the asparagus plants. So I need some advice on what to treat with. I think maybe I need to spray some neem. Hopefully that will help take care of it. I definitely need to fertilize. So you're going to say, Lisa, all this stuff is planted in with your asparagus. What are you doing? Because they were coming up so crappy in the beginning of the spring, I said I'm going to fill in a little bit so to reduce weeds in the bed. And so I planted some fava beans. Here's a fava. I planted some bush beans right down along the edge there. There is an oregano that I did pop in there. And these are Egyptian walking onions, which are perennial onions. And they're kind of along the edge of the bed, away from the asparagus themselves. The asparagus, I believe these larvae, see, they're just destroying the plants themselves, and only 1 or 2 stalks from each asparagus. Like, this was the original asparagus stalk from last year, and look, the new one is just lousy. So here's Here's another plant. It had multiple stalks last year, and now this year it has like 4 tiny thin little stalks, and they're just getting so attacked by these bugs. So I know that number one, I need to protect the asparagus by getting rid of those bugs. I can't wait for the wasps to come and hunt, and I need to be proactive. I should have been earlier. So I'm going to spray with some neem, and then over here you can see another Egyptian walking onion. It's grown up like this. It's set some bulbits right there, so that gets heavy, tips down, starts to regrow, sets more bulbits here, that gets heavy, and it'll eventually plant itself in that bed. I think that Egyptian walking onions are so cool. There's another fava bean and more oregano and one measly little asparagus that the bugs have still found, even though it's under very stinky oregano. And here are 2 more asparagus. When you go and you buy the perennials that are bagged, the perennial roots that are bagged, they're incredibly disappointing. If they are even viable at all, they're all shriveled up and dried up. You might get them to grow, you might not. It's typically better to order online from a reputable online nursery. But I caved. And I ordered I did pick up a few asparagus roots. Look how tiny they are. There's only 4. They're rubber banded together, but they are a little bit damp. So they're not completely dried out the way that can happen sometimes when you go to buy these kinds of roots from the big box stores. I'm gonna give them a try. So I am gonna fill in a couple of holes. I'm gonna show you. Now, what I showed you, there's like 4 in each bed, right? So that's not 17 plants, Lisa. What did you do with the rest of them? I moved them back behind this area of the yard. Let me show you. So this is the side yard. It actually looks really messy right now, but this is my compost situation here. I did have on this platform, that's where my rain barrels were, and I actually have all these little baby plants here because I've been pulling things and I just cannot pull perfectly good plants. I planted a bunch of pawpaw seeds last year, and they came up, and now I'm going to give them away. Those are seedlings, and I may sell them to help raise money for A Need We Feed, which is a local charity that I work with here in Ocean County, New Jersey. It helps feed hungry people. So I'm going to sell those if I can and raise some money for the organization. There's a bed with native plants that like the shade and are food producing. They're in there. We went over this in an earlier video, but over here is a bed where I actually had my another compost pile on top of this bed for a while, and I didn't really have anything happening in here that I loved. I had an American spikenard in here, which did amazing for years, and it's just such a wonderful plant. Really has quite a visual impact because it's a shade-loving plant, but the leaves are just enormous. It almost looked prehistoric. It was so cool. But the roots were attacked by voles or something, so it ended up struggling in this space once it got attacked, and I moved it, and now it's recovering in another area of the yard. So this is now an asparagus bed. And there was other stuff that wanted to come up here. I have ground nuts, which are a native perennial vine. They're in the legume family. They fix nitrogen into the soil and improve the soil around the plant. And they have beautiful flowers. and you can eat the little potatoes, basically, that grow along the root system. They're little tubers, and they are edible, and they were an important food source for Native Americans. So I had groundnuts coming up through here because I have them growing along the fence. So that's what the groundnut leaves look like. On the other side of this wood fence, there is wire fence, and they kind of twirl up there. The vines of groundnuts are very delicate. They're very thin. So here's another one. You could see how thin they are, and they just twine around this very thin wire fence. I also have another vine growing in this area, which is passion flower. So that is a much more robust vine, and that is here. You can see it's a much thicker vine, and that is growing up along with the groundnuts. Both of these plants do very well in this area, and they like this soil, so they spread around and try to come up into this bed. So I have to yank them, and I hate doing that, but I share the roots. And in the meantime, I have also spread out those asparagus. They're also getting attacked here by those stupid little bugs, but these are doing a little bit better. Now it does look like a very shady area of the yard. Lisa, asparagus like sun. What are you doing? Well, this does get quite a lot of afternoon sun. You can see up above me here, it is the morning. In the morning, the sun is behind all these massive oaks that are surrounding my property. But in the afternoon, the sun comes over to this area, which is very clear and actually it has plenty of sun exposure for this bed later in the day. So here at this point, I have 7 asparagus plants that I can see. I'm going to add 3 more to this bed, and I'm going to have to fertilize in a big way. So I would say my first instinct, which is what I use in the rest of the garden when I need to fertilize. For the most part, I use compost. See the compost behind me, lots of compost. However, sometimes I need more nitrogen for what I'm doing, so I will use something like Garden Tone, organic fertilizer, or some other product along those lines. I've also ordered organic fertilizers from some reputable online nurseries that I really love. But for something like this that I know has to put on a lot of green growth to overcome, I heard something moving down there. It sounds like there's a critter. I have lots of critters in the yard. So when I know that I need to put on a lot of green growth, which is what the asparagus are going to need to do to overcome all that damage that's been happening, I am going to use fish emulsion and dilute it. It smells terrible, and it will probably be a playground for the neighborhood cats, which already my yard is a playground for the cats because of all the critters. They do love to come here, but I am going to use the fish emulsion, and hopefully we'll get a nice flush of growth. Wish me luck. I hope it works. I am planning to treat with neem today too, and I'm planting these plants to expand the asparagus. Because they are so lousy this year, I don't think I'm going to be able to pick from them next year or the year after that. I'm going to have to wait to start harvesting from this asparagus until the next year. I'll be in my 50s, folks. I'll be fine. It'll be okay. I actually had a neighbor at the last house in Beechwood who had been gardening, he was in his 80s when I met him. He's a fantastic man. His name's Phil Potter, and he would tell me about his yard and he raised his children there. His grandchildren come and play. He had an orchard. He took the orchard down. Now he's been gardening there for decades and decades. And he would tell me about his asparagus patch, and that he had been harvesting from his asparagus patch in his backyard for 40 years. Goals, garden goals, right? Okay, thanks for watching, everybody. I'll keep you updated how it's going, and join me for all my garden updates. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and like the video. I'll see you soon.